Alright, so this is part 2 of the solar cell activity. The last section we already made our tin dioxide coated slides, and I have one ready to go right here. And now we're going to construct our solar cell. So the first thing we want to do to construct the solar cell is to dye the titanium dioxide purple basically, and we're going to use a dye that's found naturally in blackberries or raspberries. Either one works fine. In order to get that dye out, we just need to crush up the blackberries. And 3 or 4 works well, and it'll be more than enough dye for a slide. So once the blackberries are crushed up, we're going to get the juice out, and we just crush them up in this Petri dish right here. And in order to kind of strain the juice out, we're going to strain it into the other side of the plastic Petri dish. We found these, and they worked really, really well. These are a half of a T-ball, basically. You can buy these online for like $1.50 plus shipping, and you get a whole T-ball, so you'll essentially get 2 strainers for the $1.50. If you don't want to spend the money to get these reusable strainers for the activity, cheesecloth works very well, and we all know cheesecloth is really inexpensive. So I'm just going to use the cheesecloth for this purpose. And we're just going to essentially just strain the blackberry juice out of the cheesecloth into the other slide. So I'm just going to squeeze it to get that blackberry juice out. Now there's a dye inside this blackberry juice that is going to turn that titanium dioxide purple. And so we're just going to put the titanium dioxide coated slide, the titanium side down on top of the berry juice. And we're just going to let it dye. Now I'm going to let it dye for a few minutes, and while that's dyeing, you can prepare the other side of the solar cell. The other side of the solar cell, we need to put a layer of carbon. Carbon's going to act as essentially the other side of the electrode on our solar cell. The dyed titanium dioxide is going to act as the other electrode for our solar cell. And we need to coat, once again, the conductive side of the glass slide. So you'll need to use your multimeter again and set it on 200 ohms to find out which side is conductive. And so the non-conductive side is always going to read that 1, and the conductive side will read somewhere between 10 and 30. So that's the conductive side, and once again we want to clean off the glass slide. So we're just going to make sure it's nice and clean, free from any oil or fingerprints, and now we have a nice clean glass slide. And we're going to use a graphite art pencil to put a layer of carbon on this slide. Now you can also, if you don't want to go out and buy a bunch of these art pencils, use your Bunsen burner that most people have inside a classroom. If you don't, and you can just go out and buy these graphite pencils. But a Bunsen burner flame passing this glass slide, conductive side down over a Bunsen burner flame, is going to put a layer of soot on to the glass. And soot is basically just carbon. So that'll work as well. We don't have a Bunsen burner here in this classroom that I'm in either, so I'm just going to color a good layer of carbon onto this slide. And so it's kind of hard to see in the camera, but there is a layer of carbon on this slide here. And if you hold it up, you can kind of shine it sideways. You might be able to see it. If I put it underneath something white, you will be able to see that it is a little brown. There's a layer of carbon on there. So we have our carbon-coated slide. We have the titanium dioxide slide that we've now dyed purple in berry juice. We just need to clean off this slide, and we're going to use isopropanol and then some deionized water to rinse it off. So we're just going to pick up the slide, and you just want to be careful when you're rinsing it off not to touch that titanium dioxide at all. It is kind of fragile and it will rub off. And we're just going to rinse it off with deionized water first to get all the extra berry juice and any sort of other berry gunk that may be left on the slide. And then we're going to rinse it off with isopropanol, and then the isopropanol is just going to clean it a little bit better, remove any other impurities that were on the slide. So once that slide is rinsed off, we're just going to take a chem wipe and sort of gently blot it dry. Like I was saying before, you don't want to rub the titanium dioxide at all because it can rub off. So during this lab at all times, because we are using isopropanol alcohol and we are using this electrolyte solution, it is really important that students be wearing goggles and gloves at all times. The next part of this is to just basically add the electrolyte solution in between the slides. This electrolyte solution is basically iodine and potassium iodide in ethylene glycol. Now when it's dissolved in ethylene glycol, it actually becomes a triiodide solution, so it acts as a really good electrolyte to replace the lost electrons from the berry juice and take away the extra electrons from the other carbon. This is essentially an oxidation reduction reaction where electrons are traveling from the berry juice, the dye, and the titanium dioxide to the other electrode, which is carbon. And so this electrolyte solution just helps balance out those electrons, and it helps keep it going. And this electrolyte solution, like I said, is made with ethylene glycol, potassium iodide, and iodine. Now, potassium iodide is really easy to find in any chemistry supply store, and so is ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol does have a couple hazards associated with it. It's the same thing that antifreeze is made out of, and so it is a little bit poisonous. You just want to make sure it's okay if it gets on your skin. You just want to make sure it's not ingested at all. The other thing that's in here, though, iodine crystals, pure iodine crystals, are pretty hard to find now. They have a pretty strict DEA regulation on them. And so you can still purchase them, but there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with purchasing the iodine crystals. If you don't have iodine crystals inside your supply room or any of the other supplies that you need to make this electrolyte solution, you can use an iodine tincture. It needs to be an iodine tincture that is triiodine. If it's not triiodine, then it's not going to work correctly, and it also needs to be an alcohol. If it's not an alcohol, then it also won't work correctly. But just make sure it's a triiodine solution. This can be found, this is used as an antiseptic on farm animals, basically, and so you can find it at basically any farm feed store. We also have the website where we purchase this that you could use as well. And so, yeah, it's important that it's a triiodine. You can find iodine tinctures at drugstores. Those usually won't work because they're not triiodine tinctures. They're just potassium iodide and an ammonia solution, and those won't work correctly at all. So, triiodine tincture found at a farm feed store usually will work well. It won't work quite as well because there is some water in here. It's not as concentrated as the solution. The other electrolyte solution that you can make, but it does work, and you can definitely see a voltage being produced in the solar cell. So we're just going to add a couple of drops of the electrolyte solution on top of the dyed potassium iodide, the dyed tin dioxide slide. And then we're going to place on it the carbon-coated slide. Now you just want to make sure that the carbon side is touching the potassium iodide side, and that the electrolyte solution kind of flows freely in between both slides. Now, you can see here that I've actually not set the slides directly on top of each other. I've offset them a little bit, and I've offset them a little bit so we have an edge to attach our alligator clips to, because these two ends are going to act as our electrodes. So once you have this set up and ready to go, you're going to take two binder clips right here. These are little, like, 3/4 inch binder clips, and you're just going to use the binder clips to secure the edge of the solar cell. Now I'm going to use a chem wipe to just kind of clean off. It looks like I put a little bit too much electrolyte solution on that other slide, and so some of it kind of went out the edges. So I'll just clean it up a little bit. Now our solar cell's ready to go. The only other thing we need to do is take some readings from it. And so we're going to take some readings by attaching alligator clips, one to each edge of the electrode, and attaching that to our multimeter. And once again, we're just going to attach one alligator clip to each of our multimeter attachments. So we're going to actually take a voltage reading, and as you can see, I am producing about 0.1 of a volt right now. It's not a whole lot because I'm in a dark room. I'm going to go ahead and just take our solar cell outside really quickly. Alright, so we have taken our solar cell outside, and it might be kind of hard to see, but we are getting a voltage reading of 0.35 about, which is about average for these solar cells. Now, you can see if I cover up the solar cell and I stand in the shade, the voltage definitely goes down. So now, you know, let me get the camera out of the way. It's definitely going down, and it's, we move out of the sun and it will go back up. So we can take a voltage reading on the solar cell, and then we can also take a milliamp reading on the solar cell as well. So these solar cells usually produce anywhere between 0.3 and 0.4 volts if you were using the electrolyte solution made with potassium iodide and iodine. If you use the tincture, they only produce about 0.1 to 0.2 volts. But the milliamp stays about the same. So the milliamps is anywhere kind of between about 0.5, and we've seen it get as high as 1 sometimes. So there is the solar cell activity.